Dr. Townsend Smith. Looks good. It looks like we're streaming live.
Okay. All right. Chairman?
Yes, switch it back to the agenda on your share.
Okay.
Very good. Thanks for working the magic in the background.
All right, Chair Davis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this April 2nd, 2020 meeting of the North Carolina State Board of Education. I'm Eric Davis, Chair of the Board, and I call this meeting to order. I now welcome our fellow board members, advisors, staff, online listeners, and Twitter followers. And for our visitors and those listening online, our official meeting this month is condensed to one day and includes our board committee reports and votes needed on action items. Board members are reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the occurrence of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. And if during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to recuse. This is James Ford from EICS 10.
Mr. Ford has requested to be recused from EICS 10. Please note for the record. Thank you, Mr. Ford. Any other items? Very good. Thus far, the coronavirus has plagued more than 80 of our 100 counties. Each day, the number of confirmed cases rise, and we're reminded how this current health crisis affects us all across all boundaries, and the measures we must all take for our personal safety and for the safety of those around us. Given this continued spread, we strongly urge each of you to adhere to the Governor's Executive Order 121, mandating a stay-at-home measure to limit the spread of the virus and to slow the transmission within our state. Today, several school districts have reported confirmed COVID-19 cases, impacting employees serving our almost 1.6 million students. And we all know a friend, coworker, neighbor, or family member that is battling this virus. Our own colleague, Treasurer Falwell, has experienced the effects of this virus. We wish him and all others a successful recovery as we keep you in our thoughts and prayers. Additionally, we extend thanks to the countless hours our DPI staff are working to ensure that the negative effects of this virus are reduced on our students, schools, teachers, administrators, district leaders, and other employees, and that they have what they need to successfully endure through this time. While we remain hopeful for a return to in-school instruction after May 18th, we've taken swift action to ensure the needs of our seniors are immediately addressed, as well as the needs of all students, and hopeful for their eventual return to the nurturing environment of our classrooms. We lift up all of our North Carolina professional educators and thank you for your responsiveness to the needs of our public school students, especially in these challenging times. For through your actions, you are propelling us forward to a new vision of a stronger, more resilient, more equitable, more effective education system for future generations of North Carolinians on the other side of this pandemic. Today, we have the great privilege to highlight the work of our entire teaching team through presentations from Drs. Emery and Stegall, who represent the contributions of every teacher, custodian, bus driver, child nutrition specialist, social worker, psychologist, counselor, nurse, principal, superintendent, and DPI staff member. Following their presentation, we'll call on our legislative liaison, Mr. McKinney, to provide a legislative summary to include legislative considerations for the COVID-19 period and upcoming short session. Drs. Emery and Stegall, we thank you for your leadership during this time, and we call on you for your update.
Good morning, team. Bev Emery here. Chair Davis, Superintendent Johnson, members of the board, and all of our colleagues in the department, in our districts, and across the state. It's an honor to work on this team. I'm going to do a brief update on remote learning, exceptional children, and child nutrition. And I want to start by giving a shout out to members that have served on the governor's task force as well. In addition to doing the work at DPI and supporting districts, they've taken on an additional role. A special thank you to Vanessa Wren, Ellen Essick, Amy Ryan, Liz Colbert, and my colleague, David Stegall, who has co-chaired that committee. A tremendous amount of work these folks have invested, and we're so grateful. You all know that on Friday the 13th, the Department of Digital Teaching and Learning launched our first site, which has had over 70,000 hits, is updated daily, and has been an incredible resource across the state to teachers and families. I do want to say thank you to the tremendous effort there, and say that the work of digital teaching and learning in partnership with North Carolina Virtual Public has already trained close to 15,000 registrants to training opportunities. Just yesterday, 700 registrations for a DTL workshop. It is clear the educators of North Carolina are on urgent pathways to continue to develop their skills to reach students all across the state. As you know, last week we launched a remote learning survey with very quick turnaround time. Tuesday, March 31st was the deadline. We had 95 LEAs and over 30 charters that responded to that, and we'll be disaggregating and sharing the findings there, along with a coordinated plan for how our work shifts or changes in order to meet the needs we learned from the survey. In addition to this work, our Exceptional Children's Department, as you might imagine, is continuously questioned about how to support our students who are on IEPs across the state. We've had federal guidance on 2 occasions, and last Friday, our North Carolina Exceptional Children's Program issued some very detailed support for how to reach students, guidance for school psychologists, for speech pathologists, for teachers on teletherapy, ways that we can be creative about support, and also about ways we will need to continue to support these students. They are launching a website this week, and earlier in the week they had a training webinar for how to access that site. And on Friday, again, we'll meet with EC directors across the state to respond to their questions and create clarity for them. The communication efforts here, I would just say, I believe have been nothing short of spectacular. And I want to thank the entire comms team, Graham Wilson, and the addition of Jessica Swinsky on Saturday, March 14th, which seems like a very long time ago, but the work that has happened in terms of weekly conferences with superintendents, with our charter school leaders, our Friday top 10, the new guidance document that was issued on Friday that we'll continue to work on, the FAQ document that is just updated virtually. And I could go on, and David can fill in where I'm not catching something, but I'm just so grateful for the efforts of this team in helping us communicate with all of our stakeholders in the field. I did not leave child nutrition to the end of my report because it's last. I put it there because it is urgent. And I know all of you are aware of the just enormous efforts that have gone on in a very short period of time, led by Dr. Lynn Harvey. And I can't say enough about Lynn's 24/7 dedication to children eating and having good nutrition. Our data yesterday showed that we had 1,131 sites up and running. Yesterday, 342,678 breakfast meals, 356,571 lunch, 4,650 supper, and 10,342 snacks. I leave this to the end of my report because our ability to support those people on the front lines, to me, is our most urgent need right now. I know we have teams working on lifting this up from both the state board to the General Assembly. A lot of data crunching has gone on to look at how we cost out those needs. But as Chair Davis mentioned in his earlier comments, as we begin to have members of our greater North Carolina educator family diagnosed with COVID-19, this makes the work of delivering meals daily more challenging. And I know all of us are working hard, but I would just end by saying I think finding a way to compensate these folks on the front lines and incentivize the great work that they're doing is a priority for us. Thank you so much. David?
Good morning. Just real quick, I hope you can hear me. Chair Davis, Superintendent Johnson, and board members, again, as Dr. Emery shared, we want to thank you for your leadership during this difficult time. This is something that you don't ever anticipate, and you don't necessarily have contingency plans for shutting down public school buildings like we've had to do. And I think the leadership that's been shown by you has been inspiring, and we continue to adjust as the needs change. But we are very blessed to have such strong leadership from the department and from the state board, and we appreciate that. I want to hit on a few things, and again, some of it may duplicate slightly what Dr. Emery has shared. Remote learning has become a new term. We've all had to come to grips with what that means and what it looks like. And the past 2 weeks, past 3 weeks really, our teams have been focused on providing district support, teacher support, and remote learning resources. So I want to hit on those three major areas. We have an OEL, Office of Early Learning, developed a new free parent resource website to support learning for our birth to age grade 2 or 3. It's been visited. We were excited. We had diagnostics on it. It's been visited by every state in the US, and over 30 countries have visited. This site contains activities for parents and tips for schooling at home. And these activities are in both English and Spanish. As Dr. Emery shared, the remote learning resource and information website repository has been a tremendous success. We've curated numerous resources and strategies and platforms that districts could utilize. And we've had numerous companies reach out and offer up what typically would have been paid content as free during this time. So it's really allowed us to scale up the resources available to teachers. What we've realized is that some of that, and I'll talk about this a little bit in teacher support, it can become overwhelming how much content is out there. And we're trying to help offset some of that anxiety of trying to sift through that. To address some of the educational gaps for the parents and the students that don't have internet access at home, we've partnered with UNC TV and to support school-age children learning at home. We're doing so by providing free curriculum-informed over-the-air content that's widely accessible to students, especially those with limited or no internet access. So each weekday, 2 blocks of programs on UNC TV's North Carolina channel will serve students 4th through 8th grade from 8 a.m. till 1 p.m., 9th grade through 12th grade from 1 to 6 p.m., and they have K3 content being developed as well. These program blocks are available through the North Carolina channel, available statewide. Again, it's free over the air and can also be streamed online as well. The DPI staff have maintained their focus, knowing that teacher support's vital right now. And as remote learning is new to many teachers as well as to students. We've had joint collaborations with, as Dr. Emery shared, her remote learning team. Our team of curriculum leaders have worked with other teachers across the state to develop remote learning lessons and resources that are available to all districts. We have conducted and disaggregated, as shared, the remote learning needs assessment survey. So we know and can determine what teacher support's needed by grade bands and by content area. We're working with the Friday Institute to provide video support to teachers on topics such as how to support social and emotional learning remotely, how to support children with disabilities, how to support ELL students, English language learner students remotely, and also guidance on how do I move from a face-to-face content into a virtual or remote environment. So beginning next week on April the 6th, we will begin virtual PD offerings for teachers to support them, and it'll go on throughout the coming weeks. And following each session, one of the things we've really focused on is teachers that participate have a chance to complete a form that says, I need support in this way. And we'll match them up to mentors or coaches, veteran teachers and staff from DPI, veteran educators that can be a guide, a support, a mentor to them as needed. As Dr. Emery also shared, district support and communication has been a key focus. And when you have times of uncertainty, communication is vital, and correct and timely communication is vital. We have weekly webinars with all 115 superintendents that Dr. Emery and I do, along with the Superintendent Johnson participates. We do this with superintendents and with charter school leads, and that's on a separate day. We have them a Google form. They can ask questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we capture those questions in an FAQ document that they have access to and it's updated daily. So we respond as quickly as possible to questions that come up. We know if one or two are asking it, many are probably dealing with it as well. So this FAQ document hopefully is a key piece that they can go to with real-time access. We're working with you as the state board to identify policies, mandates, federal requirements that need waivers or amendments given our current environment. And some of those recommendations we've made to you around guidance for remote learning, which you acted on last week, and guidance for grading for seniors and grades K-11. We've also developed a draft potential further grading guidance if face-to-face school does not happen again. We continue to work on guidance for AIG support, assistance with dual enrolled students who are enrolled with community colleges or universities, as well as still being high school students, to make sure that we keep them on track and we help mitigate any issues they have. We're working with the NCAA clearinghouse on student eligibility guidance for athletics, on AP, IB student guidance, ACT, SAT direction, focus on CTE credentialing, how to possibly help students receive that credentialing to the greatest extent possible, and many other areas, as you might imagine. Externally, we've also, as mentioned, they're serving over 500,000 meals between breakfast, lunch, and dinner daily. Many districts are providing child care support to equip districts and communities that need that extra support. We're working with them on funding flexibility to cover these urgent needs. We also have DPI employees actually availing themselves in all 8 regions of North Carolina to help serve meals, to help deliver packets if necessary. And we're working to find how many of our 115,000+ homes have no broadband access, and connecting them with external partners to show where internet service offering maps are, how they could possibly receive free internet, Wi-Fi hotspots, and other access to internet. A lot's happening, and your leadership, again, the board and the superintendent, your leadership has really been vital through all this, and we continue to be prepared to adjust to the needs of the districts and our communities. And we appreciate the way you've lifted the department and the staff up to allow us to meet the needs of those who come to us during this difficult time. That concludes my report, sir.
Thank you, Drs. DeGaulle and Emery, and we appreciate your tireless leadership during this, as well as those that you mentioned, Dr. Harvey and Dr. Wren. And in recognizing the 4 of y'all, we really recognize even more those who on a daily basis prepare meals for our students, those who put together instructional materials, those who call our students every day or engage in a Zoom meeting with our students and those who deliver meals and instructional materials, those who clean our facilities for our staff and students. We recognize them as North Carolina Public School heroes, and we appreciate your leadership of our heroes. I'll now turn to Mr. McKinney for your update. Mr. McKinney.
Good morning, Chairman Davis, Vice Chairman Duncan, Superintendent Johnson, board members, staff at State Board, DPI, and our colleagues across the state. I'm going to share my screen. All right.
Yeah, Mr. McKinney, Dr. Townsend Smith is showing us your
Okay,
update on
great.
the
So,
screen
okay,
now.
I'll just say for you to move.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Townsend Smith. I want to open today by saying thank you. During these unprecedented times, you have all answered the call. And whether you're an educator, a parent, a school administrator, a bus driver, a dedicated community member, a child nutrition staff member, or the countless organizations who are supporting, advocating, and serving our students, our schools, and our communities. Many of you are listening, but many of you are not, because you are out living your servant leadership. So thank you for being the lighthouses that our state needs and that our humanity reflects. If we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. I wanted to open today, last Friday, I wanted to mention the passing of House Representative Mary Ann Black, and just say a quick quote that House Speaker Tim Moore said in a statement, that Black made a powerful difference in the lives of North Carolinians through decades of service. And I wanted to lift her up today and her family today and thank her publicly for her service. The next slide discusses the COVID-19 response for North Carolina Public Schools. And to echo what Dr. Emery and Dr. Stegall just discussed, the partnership here has been extraordinary. This was a response issued by both the State Board of Education and DPI, and it provides guidance to public school leaders in response to school closures resulting from the COVID-19 public health emergency. And this has been a document that has really steered the communications efforts that were mentioned earlier by the communications team led by Jessica Swinke. And I just wanted to make sure that this was a resource that everybody had in front of them, because I do believe moving forward, this fluid document is going to be a great example of the leadership being exhibited by both the State Board and DPI in partnership with the governor's office and all of the organizations that these groups are reaching out to. There's also a NCDPI COVID-19 Top 10 link, which will be issued every Friday to keep our communities across the state up to date with anything that we feel like is imperative and important to share out. Next, I wanted to lift up the COVID-19 working groups. These are groups that were collaborative working groups consisting of agency staff and local superintendents. And each specific group is tasked with bringing consideration and possible solutions to specific issues as listed over on the right there. So they range from senior grades and graduations to operations, to the remote learning plan, to different policy and legislative considerations, to funding, EC, and also the foresight and strategic planning moving in to the 2020-21 school year, as well as accountability and professional development. And these have been led and organized again by our colleagues, Dr. Bev Emery and Dr. David Stegall. So the speaker also established the state House Select Committees on COVID-19 specific working groups. Their health, continuity of state operations, economic support, education, and others. And these are remote meetings by teleconference to discuss developing responses to the COVID-19 crisis, depending on their working group's focus. And I wanted to briefly provide links to the audio streams to these, as well as any type of literature, any type of anything that really in relation to these meetings. So we can move to the next slide, please. So the Select Committee on COVID-19 Education Working Group met last Thursday, and there were joint presentations by Jeff Coltrane from the governor's office, as well as Dr. Townsend Smith, myself, and Dr. Beverly Emery. Brian Gwynn also presented from the legislative analysis team. We have provided all of the documents here for your look. And I just wanted to bring up a couple of points here moving down. Also, documents from the Economic Support Working Group and the Select Committee on Healthcare. Wanted to also provide a resource for the Education Commission of the States, which tracks state education policy across the nation and gives us a great tool to do state comparisons as we're moving forward and working with the Policy and Legislative Working Group on considerations in legislation. This is the 2020 legislative update. Again, this was presented at the last meeting as well. And we are still waiting on whether or not short session will reconvene in a remote way on Tuesday, April 28th. So I will keep you updated on that. And also wanted to announce Dr. Kristen Baker appointment as the North Carolina 82nd District Representative. And she has been appointed to fill the unexpired term of our late North Carolina Representative Linda Johnson. These are the legislative funding priorities that were before the COVID-19 crisis. And I wanted to lift those back up because we are continuously working in great partnership with the General Assembly and their staff to keep these lifted, but also as presented at the House Select Education Committee, we have also been discussing considerations involving temporary North Carolina testing waivers, school accountability and school report card temporary suspensions, temporary waivers including school calendar flexibility for the current academic year and moving forward, temporary suspension considerations of teacher evaluation process, and considerations for student teaching requirements. So these are all being discussed and in consideration in partnership with DPI, the state board, and the General Assembly members. We can move past this one. And very briefly, I wanted to also lift up some of the things that are happening around our communities and on our North Carolina Shire update. And I've put links. I'll briefly go over each one of these just so that you're aware of some of the incredible happenings around the state and the work that's being done. The first one is our challenge to everyone across the state to lift up hashtag North Carolina School Heroes. This has been an unbelievable effort as we lift up school transportation, as we lift up school nutrition, and as we lift up individuals and districts across our state who are working tirelessly to serve our students. It's been interesting to watch this movement spread from state to state, as I've now seen hashtag VA School Heroes, as well as other states. So this has become something that's been led by North Carolina. It's been really neat to see unfold. And these are just several pictures of our school nutrition, school transportation, and some of the unique opportunities that our students have had in practicing DHHS requirements as this is a parade that we've seen kind of duplicated across the state. And our very own Tabari Wallace there demonstrating once again why he's such an incredible school administrator as and his servant leadership. Also wanted to lift up No Kid Hungry. There's their website, and they've been an amazing partner with Dr. Lynn Harvey's leadership with school nutrition. There's a number there to text. There's also more information about food deliveries and an ability to check in with local school districts, which has been a great resource in conjunction with the amazing work that the department has done in regards to child nutrition across our state. This is the map that No Kid Hungry provides with North Carolina Meals for Kids locations. Also wanted to lift up our North Carolina Teacher of the Year, Mariah Morris, and her work with remote teaching. Just an incredible way to bring all of these incredible educators across the state together to show their talents and to continue to reach out to our students. So there's a link to Toy Time, Teaching on Your Time, and the YouTube videos that her teams have been developing and putting out there for our educators across the state. The partnership that was mentioned earlier by Dr. Stegall with the UNC TV at Home Learning is another incredible partnership between the North Carolina Department and UNC TV. And there's a link there provided as well. This started this past Monday. And if there are any questions from the board members, I would be honored to answer them. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to share today, and thank you for your service.
Any questions for Mr. McKinney? Seeing none, Mr. McKinney, we thank you for this report, and in particular, we appreciate how you've embraced the challenges before us as opportunities to build bridges for the benefit of our students. Thanks for your work.
Thank you, sir.
Board members, you've seen the agenda for over a week and had the opportunity to review it. I ask if there are any requests for changes to the agenda. Hearing none, I request a motion for approval of the April 2nd, 2020 agenda.
Moved. David.
Motion by Mr. Buxton. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hall. Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll to capture the vote?
Yes, sir. Mr. Buxton,
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine,
Yes.
Ms. Kamnitz,
Yes.
Mr. Keenan,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers, Ms. White,
Dr. Townsend.
I got you
Yes.
now, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, now I can. Thank you. Mr. Chastain,
Yes.
Mr. Ford,
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan, Vice Chair Duncan, Vice Chair Duncan,
Yes.
thank you. Chair Davis,
Yes.
it's unanimous.
Thank you. We have an agenda. We'll now proceed to today's committee reports. I remind committee chairs in the audience that all voting on consent and any item requiring action will be done at the end of the agenda via roll call. And I recognize Ms. White, Chair of the Education, Innovation, and Charter Schools Committee. Ms. White.
Good morning, everyone. This is Amy White. I share the responsibility in leading this committee with Ms. Jill Kamnitz. We have several items for discussion today. EICS 1 is the approval or the discussion regarding the 2020 charter school application timeline and process. And here to walk us through those changes is Mr. Machado.
Thank you, Ms. White. State Board of Ed Superintendent Johnson. Our 2020 charter school application timeline mirrors the one that we're currently in. There's just some minor changes. Just want to go over it quickly. It'll open on May 25th of this year. It'll close on July 24th. All fast track, replication, accelerated, and regular applications will all be due at the same time on July 24th. the fast track and accelerated applications will receive priority review. And per general statute, the fast track applications must receive State Board of Ed decisions in 120 days from the application submission, which would be in October. One change that Charter School Advisory Board is recommending is we're going to be replacing the 30-minute clarification interview with a 1 hour full interview. And that we're doing that because during the clarification interviews, a lot of times the questions that were asked, CSAB would debate, well, that's not a clarification question. That's a full interview question. So we thought that it would be more efficient to have a full interview for round one. And after CSAB will deliberate after that first interview, and their options would be to forward a recommendation to State Board of Ed for approval. CSAB can advance that application to round two for another interview, or CSAB can deny that application. State Board of Ed will consider CSAB recommendations for accelerated applications by February, and State Board will vote by June on the regular time applications. We also have tentative application trainings that will be done virtually on June the 13th, June the 20th, and June the 27th. And that's trainings for prospective applicants. Ms. White, that is a quick review of our timeline and rubric.
Thank you, Mr. Machado. Dr. Townsend Smith, since I'm calling in through my phone, I am unable to see any board member who may need to raise a question. Can you help me identify anyone who might have a question?
Yes, ma'am. Don't see anyone right now.
Okay, board members, you've got this information in front of you. This is an item for discussion. It'll be back for us in front of us next month for action. Hopefully we'll be doing that in person. EICS 2 is a request from Alamance Community Charter to amend its enrollment projection. Mr. Machado.
Charter schools request to increase enrollment. This is a school that is located in Alamance County. It is currently in its planning year. We'll schedule to open in August of 2020. You can see the enrollment increases first year K3 going from 400 to 460. And in the information that we gave you, it goes over all the years and what the increase would be. They currently have over 100 students on their kindergarten waiting list. They are going to use a weighted lottery. They are going to offer transportation, and they do have a free and reduced lunch program. And they also are applying for the NC Access Grant. And their building can handle the extra students. Because of the large number of students on their wait list, the fact that their building can handle the increased enrollment, the Charter School Advisory Board is recommending that this amendment request be granted.
Thank you, Mr. Machado. Board members, do you have questions about Alamance Community Charter's request to increase its enrollment?
Ms. White, it's JB.
Yes, sir. Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this question for Mr. Machado, I think, is not a question about the school or its wait list or anything like that. It's just a financial question. And they look to, in the first year with this increase, have about a $33,000 surplus, which on a 3.8, I think I'm right, $1 million budget is fairly thin. And those projections are looking at least local contributions that were being suggested prior to what we're going through now. So I'm concerned about if those projections hold up, especially from local county school funding. And then the second issue is if they build out a school for an extra 60 kids this year in terms of staffing and transportation, based on their projections, if they under-enroll by 3 to 4 kids, they're underwater. And so I'm just concerned, and we're for discussion this month, I understand, so I'm just putting this on the table. I'm just concerned that in this budget environment and with that thin a margin on their budget, it wouldn't be prudent to expand when they haven't even begun school yet, and that this probably wouldn't be the best time to do that. But I'm asking that purely on a fiscal matter. I'm not making any comment on quality of planning and preparation in school, and I want to be clear about that.
That's a great point,
Thank you.
Mr. Buxton. Excuse me, Ms. White, I'm sorry.
No, Mr. Machado, please.
Okay, the first question about local funding, obviously, we don't know what the local funding is going to be. We certainly don't anticipate that would decrease. We don't know that for sure, but we're under the guidelines that the local funding will remain same. That is a thin margin, but we do feel like because of the strong wait list and strong community involvement, the strong board, that we feel like they will be able to meet these enrollment requests. Obviously, CSAB voted on this before the COVID-19 crisis was in place. So those are great points.
Appreciate the clarification.
And this is Mrs. White. I understand that they were seeking to increase primarily for kindergarten with the 100 folks on the wait list.
That is correct.
Board members, any other questions?
I see no other questions, Ms. White.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Townsend Smith. We'll move on to EICS 3 and EICS 4. Commonwealth and Stewart Creek High School have requested to change their EMO. Central Wake High School, I'm bundling these together, also has a request in front of us to change its EMO. Mr. Machado, would you like to walk us through the particulars of those two requests?
Yes, ma'am. Commonwealth and Steel Creek are schools located in Mecklenburg County. The other school is located in Wake County. This is an alternative charter school, which is also a dropout prevention school. The reason Commonwealth and Stewart Creek are in one amendment and the other one in Central Wake is on another one is because Commonwealth and Stewart Creek are governed by the same board. The two schools in Charlotte govern on the same board, and Central Wake has a separate board. They are changing the management company is Alternative Learning Solutions, Inc. And the owner of that company is selling his business to a group of investors. And the new name is going to be Alternative Learning Solutions, LLC. The entire organizational chart and management team will remain the same. The current president of the EMO will become the CEO. The management agreement will remain exactly the same. And both boards have vetted the new ownership and have agreed to do business with this new management company. Our office and the CSAB look at this as just a minor change in the name of the organization. And the management of it will remain exactly the same. And the contract between the EMO and the charter school boards remain exactly the same. They are not changing, and everybody knows that they cannot change without state board of approval. So that is the situation for these two amendments.
Mr. Machado, would you go ahead and walk us through Central Wake High School as well?
Certainly. Central Wake is in Wake County. Again, alternative status dropout prevention school. They are also asking to change the relationship with their management company from ALS Inc. to ALS LLC. And again, the management company contract is remaining the same. The management organization's team is remaining the same, and the president of that company will now become the CEO of it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Machado. Questions from board members about these two items? Okay, board members, I will let you know that we did receive a request from entities representing ALS, and there is some urgency in having us make a decision on these two items expediently so that they can take care of the business transaction, the actual sale of one entity to the other. And so while this is a discussion item this month, I would put it in front of the chair that at our next meeting, our next called meeting, perhaps if we're talking by phone, that I would like to put these items or expedite the voting of these items at the next possible board meeting. Not voting on those today.
Yeah, we can certainly do that, Ms. White.
Thank you, Chair Davis. That'll put us with EICS 5. This is Team CFA Community Public Charters request to terminate its education management organization agreement. Mr. Machado.
Thank you. This school is in its first year. It's located in Gaston County. It's a K-5 school with 240 students. Both the school and Team CFA have agreed to terminate the CMO agreement. No fees have been paid to Team CFA, and they are not requesting any fees. Currently, the school is using third-party vendors for finance, power school, and consulting. Team CFA has prepaid those expenses and is not asking to be reimbursed. And the new name of the school will be Community Public Charter School. And that's the details on this amendment request.
Okay. Board members, questions about Community Public Charters request to end its relationship with Team CFA? Okay. Seeing or hearing none, EICS 6 is Endeavor Charter's request to increase its enrollment. Mr. Machado.
Endeavor Charter School is a K-8 charter school. It's in Wake County, opened up in 2008. It is an A school and has consistently exceeded growth. They are allowed to grow up to 30% because them obviously not being in being a low performing school. They are requesting to grow by 39% for the 2021-22 year, not the next school year, but 2021-22. That would be, they're allowed, a 30% increase would be 168 students. A 39% increase would be 220. So we're looking at an additional 52 students, and they'll be adding additional classes for their school. This will allow the school to secure financing for additional building and eliminate the use of modular buildings. And currently they have 1,476 applicants for 88 seats that was in their lottery that they had earlier this month. So again, this is an increase of 39% for 2021-22 school year.
Okay. Questions from colleagues? Dr. Townsend Smith lets me know that there are none. So that concludes the items that are before us for discussion this month. I will bring to the board's attention that there are 4 items that we will vote on as a part of the Education, Innovation, and Charter School consent agenda. EICS 7 is Achievement Charter Academy's weighted lottery and lunch program amendment request. EICS 8 is the Institute for the Development of Young Leaders request to expand to a high school. EICS 9 is Hertford County's request to rescind its restart application. And EICS 10 is Granville County restart application, their actual submission. These items were before us last month, and they are in front of us today for approval on our consent agenda. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report. Thank you for your time today, and thank you to leadership for both Dave Machado and his team for working diligently during this unprecedented time.
Thank you, Ms. White. I now recognize Mr. Buxton, Chair of the Student Learning and Achievement Committee. Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm joined at the Student Learning Achievement Committee by Dr. Olivia Oxendine. I'd like to take a brief moment to thank, consistent with your remarks earlier, Mr. Chairman, members of the department who have been working so feverishly, it's probably a bad term in these days, but diligently on all of these SLA items, and amidst not only their duties as a department employee, many with duties as now adjunct teachers for their kids in school, and juggling all of that and dealing with family. And I just want to appreciate the at all hours calls and availability folks have had to help do what we need to do for districts and schools and teachers and students and principals. So I just want to add my thanks to those folks with whom Dr. Oxendine and I have been working closely over the past few weeks. We have 3 items for action today, and we also have a few items for discussion. We'll start with our first, which is an action on first reading, the K-12 Computer Science Standard Course of Study. You'll remember at our last called meeting last week, we took action on our textbook adoption process and pushed pause on that due to the difficulty of continuing that process. This is in that same vein. Department is requesting essentially that we press pause for the remainder of the 2019-20 school year on the development of the K-12 Computer Science Standard Course of Study, and we pick that up as soon as possible at a time when we can get more feedback into the revision process from the field. The department thinks that's critical, and the SLA committee would agree. Let me pause to see if there are any questions, and we can bring either Dr. Hemphill or Dr. Stegall on the phone to answer them. All right, hearing none, we'll move to our first action item, which is SLA 1, Career and Technical Education State Plan. Board members, we've been looking at this in some version or form for well over a year. We looked at this last month when we were together as a discussion item. At that time, did not have questions about this plan. Once we vote on this plan, if we are to approve it, this will then be submitted to the federal government as our 5-year plan with the Perkins reauthorization. Just one note before I ask if there are any questions, and first recognize Trey Michaels, Mr. Michaels, for any comments he might want to make. I do think this plan breaks new ground. It gives us new directions with our local needs assessment. It builds in more labor market informed data and demand side employer data. It builds in new career pathway, course schedules, and career pathway majors. I think this is an important new direction for the state. Commend the department for its work on this, and would ask Mr. Michaels if he has any additional comments he'd like to make before we see if there are any board questions.
Mr. Buxton, he's listening, but he's not on the call. I do have Mr. McDonald. I do have Miss McDonald on the line, so we can direct any questions to her.
Great, thank you, Ms. Townsend Smith. Board members, any questions about this plan? We will vote on approving this plan later today. All right, hearing none, move to SLA 2, which is the appointment for the Governor's School Board of Governors. Board members, you remember last month we came together to look at this item, and we had a couple different candidates and some questions about timeline and the like. I've had a chance since that time to understand better the timeline, to talk with both nominees, and appreciate having 2 excellent nominees for this. SLA committee believes it's appropriate at this time to present Superintendent Johnson's nominee. Respect his recommendation to our board. I had a chance to talk with Ms. Waugh, Rhonda Waugh, And I will tell you, she's quite enthusiastic about this opportunity to serve. I was appreciative of her excitement and strong support for what the governor's school means to students and families across the state, and am pleased to advance her nomination and the superintendent's recommendation at this time. I would also want to say a note about Ms. Deborah Goldberger, Dr. Deborah Goldberg, whom I also had a chance to talk to. And it would be my hope that at some point down the road, we might have a chance to consider her nomination again, because she would also be an outstanding addition to the Governor's School Board of Governors. And unfortunately, don't have a couple slots to do right now, but maybe at some point down the road. So anyway, at this point, we're happy to advance Ms. Rhonda Waugh as the nominee for the Governor's School Board of Governors. And let me pause and see if there are any questions.
No questions, Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Ms. Townsend Smith. So board members, those are our 3 action items for today. We have 3 discussion items, which we're going to do relatively briefly, just given our format today. First is SLA 3, Collaborative Framework for Reading, B12 Literacy, High Quality Reading Instruction Definition. Members, you'll remember that this is the first element of our 9 elements in the State Board Framework for Action on K-3 reading. And we've asked the department to develop a definition of high quality reading instruction that can anchor our work in professional development and policy and educator prep. And at this time, after a lot of work with the field, I'd like to ask, I believe we have Dr. Mullenix on the phone to do a brief walkthrough of our process and the language that is being offered for discussion this month.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. This is Angie Mullenix. Good morning, everyone. So I'm just going to briefly recap where we are and explain where we're heading in the next month or so. Again, this is for the definition that pertains to the collaborative framework. That is one of the 9 components of the collaborative framework. And as Mr. Buxton explained, this definition will help to make connections across all aspects regarding reading instruction in our state. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. These 2 slides have been on each month's presentation. Again, the rationale is that stakeholders need one consistent and concise plan that represents that presents in one location the alignments of multiple existing plans regarding reading, policy, legislative, and grant requirements, commissions, committees, and or external agency efforts. Next slide. And I touched on this. We have the State Board Collaborative Framework, and this is one component of this. Next slide, please. And here I want to briefly explain this graphic. So Mr. Buxton and I both mentioned this. The definition it seems like it's just a definition, but it is more than that. This definition is going to guide educator prep programs and professional development as we go forward in the future. It's going to guide all subsequent documents, any evaluations regarding Read to Achieve connections and K-3 literacy. It's also going to provide a common understanding of reading instruction across all grade levels for our state. Next slide. And just as an overview, this definition has been in progress for about 5 months now, 6 months now, and we have drafted, put out for public review and stakeholder input, redrafted, put back out for public review and redrafted, and also provided to the state board in a Friday update. And then next slide. So we previously in the last few months, we've had a working definition of high quality reading instruction. And the first paragraph that you see there on that slide is really a preface to the definition. The second paragraph has been the working definition. Within that definition, there persist a few concerns regarding whether it spans the full pre-K 12 or birth to 12 grade bands that we're really trying to make sure we reach with one definition. Next slide. So in keeping that preface that you see there, we're going to go to the next slide. And I do want to apologize, this slide, the last word there should say text, T-E-X-T-S. So I just want to make sure you understand that. So in recognizing that the definition we've had going for the last few months with minor tweaks here and there was really not touching on all of our grade spans. And so it seems most appropriate that we would take that definition and further refine it down so that it is a definition that is general enough, but yet broad enough that we are touching on all of those grade spans. And then as we operationalize that definition, to further define what reading instruction looks like for each grade span. So take this definition and then further define it by K3 or K2 or pre-K2, 3-5, 6-8, and 9-12. Because attempting to provide a thorough definition that really encompasses all of those grade spans is a very difficult task and could create some confusion. So if we have this definition in its brevity and then further expand out, we believe that's the most appropriate approach for this. I'm going to pause for a second. If there are any questions, Deanna, if you can just let me know to pause. And I'll go forward to the next slide. I also want to mention that we have been working on a glossary for the definition. We want to provide a glossary of terms that corresponds to the definition for reading instruction so that there's no confusion. And then we'll further branch that out into operationalizing what that looks like for the grade spans, as I mentioned. Next slide. Okay, and I just mentioned our next steps. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Molnix. I want to note one thing and then ask Dr. Oxendine, who's been working closely with the department on this, if she'd like to make a few comments. There's another attachment that we have access to, which looks to me to be perhaps the beginning of a K3. There we go. I think it's on everyone's screen now. You just want to say a word about this?
Yes, so that was the definition that had been out for public feedback, and we've been discussing within the B12 committee, and it seems that we are going to still continue to have that. So as we have these documents and we kind of think of it as how we're packaging it, that first paragraph is going to be the preface to all of the definition of reading instruction. And then that second paragraph would be the one that's going to help us with the K3 or K2. And we're really working on how to best branch out those grade spans appropriately.
Thank you, very helpful. Dr. Oxendine, any comments you'd like to make here?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me? I'm not quite
Yes,
sure that
we
I'm
can.
manipulating all these gears. Thank you ever so much, Dr. Molnix, for your incredible persistence with this task, because achieving a definition of high quality reading instruction such that you reflect the comments and the wishes of others is to be applauded. I do have just a quick question about the way you plan to refine this in terms of grade spans? Am I correct to think that to assume that you are going to maybe do descriptors of what a K2 classroom looks like in terms of reading instruction, and maybe 6-8, and then secondary education classrooms at the high school level? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. Because it's very difficult to provide one blanket instructional piece for reading instruction. It looks much different in the high school level as those students begin to comprehend and explore beyond the text. They're not concerned with phonemic awareness at that point. And so we will operationalize that according to those particular levels and make sure that it's appropriate for teachers, that they can use it to understand how to go forward with reading instruction.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. That takes care of my question and comment.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. And again, thanks for your leadership on this item. Board members, any other questions for Dr. Molinix? We'll take this up as an action item next month. That'll be our plan. SLA 4 is a required report to the North Carolina General Assembly on competency-based assessment in teaching and a model for scaling that in North Carolina. I don't know that the General Assembly knew just how prescient they were in asking for this report, given what we've been experiencing over the last few weeks and how our teachers and districts are now dealing with these issues. We've got on the line with us Ms. Sneha Shah-Coltrane and Dr. Tammy Howard to make some comments about the report. I'm not going to ask them to go through a full presentation on the report. You have it in eBoard and you've had a chance to read it. I would say that given the context in which this report is being presented and that it is discussion, I think there are a number of things that the department and I think the board realize have become particularly relevant and may take us beyond what was in this report and starting to think about moving forward what's going to be needed to build out a competency-based assessment and teaching model. So this report is in many ways a look at what exists in our state today, the work our state has done, what we're seeing playing out, and some of the issues and tensions that are emerging as districts and schools are working to make this come alive. As we look towards a final report that we would deliver in May, the department has talked about some addenda that they may want to put in here that is directly related to some of the experience we're having now. So I just want to make the board members aware that the report we're discussing here may necessarily go through a few revisions as we make it a contemporary document given COVID-19. So let me stop there and ask first Dr. Howard to make some comments, and then Ms. Shaw-Coltrane, and then we'll take some board questions.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton, and good morning. So this report, much like our efforts around COVID-19, is very illustrative of a combined effort from several divisions in our department. We gathered together advanced learning, digital teaching and learning, standards, curriculum and instruction, and career and technical education to ask ourselves the question, what does it mean to address competency-based assessment and teaching? And one of the first steps in doing that was we identified a definition, which states simply that it's a personalized learning approach that provides a flexible and engaging learning environment in which progression is based on mastery of explicit learning objectives or competencies as demonstrated through evidence of student learning rather than the time spent in a course or a topic. So with that definition in place, and we relied upon an alliance that was really built through our regional education lab for the Southeast that did some work over the past few years, and Ms. Shaw-Coltrane has more information about this, gathered some districts that were working toward competency-based education, as well as partnered with RTI International, the community college system, the UNC system, and the independent colleges and universities, and really provided support to some locals who were very engaged in trying to transition to a competency-based approach. So in our reflection on this, we acknowledge that there are several aspects of work in the department that supports this local effort, and that from our perspective, the real focus is at that local effort with the state giving support so locals can make progress in this area. And the report, I will not go through it as Mr. Buxton noted, but there are several areas that really demonstrate the support that the department is giving in this area. And several of those areas, of course, as we have progressed over the past couple of weeks with COVID-19, have been in place to provide even more support and structure with that way. As we go forward, we are, of course, interested in looking at the of making this more about looking at the state perspective and how the state perspective really supports the local effort in this work. So with that, I will pause, and Ms. Shaw Coltrane is available for questions, or at your discretion may have some comments.
Let me first see if we have any questions. Ms. Shaw Coltrane, anything you'd like to add to Dr. Howard's comments?
Dr. Howard wrapped things up very nicely. The key here is that our role, as we have seen both in this COVID-19 and prior to this COVID-19 crisis, has been to remove barriers. How do we remove barriers so that districts can do the incredible work that they have the responsibility and honor to do for our students? The biggest barrier to moving in this direction, one of the biggest barriers is in fact community support and understanding. That is what our work with the districts taught us, as well as the REL. When we all discussed how do we move forward, it seemed like one of the largest barriers was in fact community understanding. When you're moving from a grading system of an A to F, which for for decades and generations has been there, going to a very different model takes significant time. And the committee has discussed with Mr. Buxton and all of us internally how COVID-19 may in fact be the impetus to really start moving some of this work even more forward. So we look forward to the future. If there are silver linings in this public health crisis, this is one of them, and that we do look forward to continued work in this effort.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw Coltrane, and Dr. Howard and board members. We will bring that back for an action item in May. SLA 5 is our last discussion item. It's our annual State Advisory Council on Indian Education report to the board. I want to thank Dr. Connie Locklear, who is the chairwoman of the commission, for her leadership on this report. And we have Dr. Susan Silver, who's our DPA liaison to the commission, available to make some comments. Like with the competency-based assessment report, you have the draft report and the PowerPoint. You've had a chance to look at it. I want to recognize Dr. Silver to make some comments about the report. It would be our hope that we may be able to hear this in person down the road, but understand that that might not be the case. So I want to have a chance to walk through some of the report and its findings. Dr. Silver. I want to see if Dr. Silver is with us.
Good morning.
There we go. The floor is yours.
Good morning. As Mr. Buxton stated, I am going to be brief. It's our hope that possibly next month or in June, the full board would be able to come to you, as the tradition is for the board itself to present their report. I'll pause for any questions, but in general, we're going to wait for them to be able to present their recommendations themselves. A couple of things I will highlight is that An addition to the report this year is the suspension data. We got a request at last year's when the report was presented to add that. So that is a new addition to the report. The recommendations are there. There are 6 from the board this year. They are in alignment with last year's as we continue to see a lack of progress in those areas. The newest one, which is number 6, you'll note that one, is about the tribal consultation and collaboration piece. ESSA now calls for, by law, a requirement that districts collaborate with their, not just their Title VI programs, but with the tribal entities themselves to create programming for American Indian students. So that is something that this council is very passionate about continuing to push. I'm going to stop there because, again, our hope is that the council will be able to present those, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to respond to those at this time.
Dr. Silver, thank you very much. There is one question. I want to call Mr. Ford for a question.
Yes.
Hi, Dr. Silver, and I actually apologize, Mr. Buxton. This is not as much a question as it is a comment. I do realize that the council will be, God willing, able to present the recommendations at our next meeting. But I did just want to my board members, to our fellow board members, just compel us to look at all the recommendations thoroughly and to recall that, several months ago, the issue of Native Americans, First Nations folks, and the sort of education that's needed to help create improvements in these areas was at least a discussion and of political controversy. And I think that what we see here embedded throughout all the recommendations is the notion of being culturally responsive. And what that means, I just want us to remind ourselves, is that we're going to have to take radically different orientations. I would even go as far as saying decolonizing, to use the academic term, our approaches, because clearly what this report demonstrates is that there is a need for that specific and targeted population. And so oftentimes the universal applications or universal approaches may not properly suit the needs of very specific cultural orientations of people groups. And so I just wanted to put a pin in that to say that as we go forward and as these discussions get raised again, as they likely will, let us remind ourselves that there are specific needs for specific populations. And when discussing American Indians or Native Americans, I want us to keep in mind this notion of being culturally responsive in our orientation. And with that, I'll conclude, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ford, for those comments and observations. Important. Dr. Oxendine.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Buxton, and to Dr. Silver and also to Dr. Locklear and others who served on the planning and coordination team for the second annual Summit, Indian Education Summit that was held, I think that was toward the end of January, which proved to be a tremendous success and well attended by Indian communities and Indian educators and representatives from the various tribe, state, and the one federal tribe that we have in North Carolina. I would call my colleagues' attention and insistence that we give due diligence to the recommendations that come forward from SACE. This report goes back to the first one, 1988 or 1989. I would offer to say if I were to do a longitudinal study, a meta-analysis of the recommendations, I might find that a good number of those recommendations probably are repetitive. So I would say that I would hope that we will pay close attention and make sure that we're asking questions consistently about the progress of those recommendations that annually come to our attention. So with that said, then I will turn the mic back over to you, Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. And I think both those comments we need to hold for when be important for us to reflect on and reconsider when we come back together. It's our intention to do this in person when we have that chance and as we normally do. So Dr. Silver, thanks for being on the phone with us and making your comments, and board members will return to this item in the next month or two, depending on when we can hear it in full. Our last item is a new business item, the COVID-19 Accountability Workgroup Report. As you know and heard earlier, department has a number of different work groups. One is a policy and accountability work group looking at state statutes and board policies that need review and may need requests for waivers. This is a pretty comprehensive list as it relates to assessment related decisions and accountability that are in board and statute. This is not a document for approval at this time. This is for your awareness so you understand the kind of areas that the department may be coming to us to request a waiver on for this school year, and that the department and board will be working together with the North Carolina General Assembly. And so this is a new document. I would just note, again, you will see assessment related issues, pay issues related to those assessments, identification issues, and some related to assessments like the ACT and work keys, where we may not need a waiver, but we do want to preserve the opportunity for students to take those for their benefit, whether it is in post-secondary or the workforce. So at this time, I'd like to call on Dr. Howard to make some comments about this document and then ask board members to ask some questions. Dr. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. And again, good morning. So what we have attempted to present here is an overview of some of the areas that may require additional attention as we go forward. The first one on the list, of course, is Read to Achieve. And the information there, of course, is looking at all the different parts of Read to Achieve that have been affected by not having end of grade test scores for the spring 2020. The next one, of course, is the bonuses. And this, of course, I would like to draw attention that we are going to be able to administer the AP, the advanced placement assessments. College Board has agreed to administer those in students' homes. And so those test scores will be available, and there are associated bonuses with those. And so part of the discussion on this item would be to think about with other data missing for bonuses that we typically award, would we also award the AP advanced placement bonuses or not? And then the Career Technical Education Division, theirs is more ongoing with their earned credentials bonusing structure. And so they're anticipating that they would be given bonuses as well. Not to necessarily go through each one of these independently, but to stress a couple more that I think need review. The ACT administration, just to be clear, this is because students who are in 11th grade, then when they become seniors, the ACT data is what we call a lagging indicator, and that is an accountability indicator the next school year. So we have approximately, we think, 7,000 students who either because they missed the initial test date or because they're a student in a school that had permission from the department not to administer on February 25th, that have not taken the ACT. And we are working with ACT to provide that opportunity in the fall of 2020 for these students only. And again, the reason for doing this is because that data is needed for accountability for the 2020-21 school year, which has not been waived. The next one that we'd like to stress is the work keys. So work keys, it is not an accountability issue as the ACT is. It is actually just something to consider that the work keys administration that was scheduled for April of 2020, of course, is not going to occur now. And we've just been having some conversations with ACT of the possibility of providing the students who were not able to be tested, and these are students who are currently 12th graders, to have that opportunity to be tested and for it to be paid as it normally would have been through appropriated funds from the General Assembly. So every community college in North Carolina is considered a test center for work keys. And students, once we are no longer sheltering in place, once we have moved beyond some of the restrictions that we have now, could possibly, with approval, go to a community college, participate in the Work Keys assessment for their benefit, for the opportunity to possibly have a certificate that they would then be able to show potential employers. So the details of this and for consideration are coming together, and just need some feedback eventually of the interest in providing that as an opportunity. And just to stress, that would be an opportunity for those students. It is not an accountability issue. Innovative School District, of course, there will not be data from the end of grade test or to identify qualifying schools for that going into 2020-21. The Task 003, which is a state board policy, that particular one really has been attended to through the action the board took on March 27th. And then the last piece that I will not go through are just looking at all the various statutes that require aggregate data for school level decisions. And that aggregate student performance data, of course, comes from the end of grade and end of course test. And the one that is individual student scores, of course, is the advanced courses in mathematics. And we have an explanation there of how that works and how we will not now have that data. And on that particular item, again, Ms. Shaw Coltrane is the one who has most of that information. This again was a team effort. Several directors from different divisions are working together to put this all in one document for your use. So with that, I will pause.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. Appreciate that good review. Board members, again, this is for our information to understand some of the issues that may come back to us on state board policy and that we may be working with, we'll be working with the General Assembly on as we seek waivers. Questions from board members about specific items?
I have a question.
Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you so much, Dr. Howard, for that nice overview. I may have missed the question that I'm about to raise because my mind is all about this dashboard in front of me. So talk to me just a minute about what we're going to do with NC check-ins and formative assessments from iStation.
So I can address NC check-ins first. I do not know that I have the information with respect to iStation. So two issues on NC check-ins. One is if the schools do resume this academic year, we have already communicated to the field that we will continue to have available for their use NC check-ins 3, which is the last of the 3 NC check-ins for their use as they deem appropriate. And then, of course, going forward into 2020-21, we would have those available as we normally do. So with NC check-ins, just giving more opportunity if the schools do come back in session and then proceeding with those as scheduled for next year. With iStation, I regret I'm not the person I believe is the expert.
Thank you very much. But you did answer the question about the check-ins because they've been so successful since implementation a couple of years ago.
Yes. One with if you'll indulge me, I will just share that one conversation that we're having internally is around our plans next year for the innovative assessment pilot and what that will look like, and that we will not have field test data from the end of grade test this year to support that work. But we will have more information on that as we go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. Board members, other questions? Seeing and hearing none, I'd make one last note, just because I've had some questions about this and know the field is interested. There have been some questions about the social studies revisions that we approved the work on, and we'll need to come back and approve those revisions so we can move to build the courses for the next year. That also includes the economics and personal finance requirement. And just a note that we are not, and when I say we, board and department, not planning to pause that work. So that work would continue as we had currently approved it, and we would have the requirements for the EPF course in place for the entering class of fall 2020, and the sets of courses for social studies in place as we approved at a previous meeting moving forward. So I just wanted to make a note of that since that's been a question. Mr. Chairman, with that, we are finished with SLA's report.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. I now recognize Dr. Oxendine, Chair of the Educator Standards and Practice Committee. Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you so much, Chair Davis. I am Olivia Oxendine, and I chair the Educator Standards and Practices Committee. And joining me in that leadership role is Ms. Amy White. I'm very pleased today to kick off my segment of the agenda with a new business item and an update that will be presented by Dr. Ann Clark, who co-chairs the K-3 Literacy Task Force, and joining her in that role is Dr. Crystal Hill. Just kind of some background information. This is the first installment in terms of report to the state board. The overall purpose, I suppose the ultimate goal of the Literacy Task Force is to come forward to the state board with a list of recommendations that we can consider and that we can hopefully approve and adopt and move forward out to the EPPs, those places where we are preparing our future elementary and middle grades and high school teachers, preparing them in the area of reading and literacy. So this task force is about many things. It's also practicing educators and improving their skills in the area of reading and literacy, but it's more about looking into the field and the venue of higher education, our schools and colleges of education, where our teachers, our future teachers, are prepared. So with that said, I will welcome Dr. Clark, and she has all the technology tools to begin her presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine, and members of the State Board of Education. I'm delighted to provide this preliminary update report to you this morning. You have a pretty significant PowerPoint in front of you, which time will not allow me to go into in great detail, but it is intended to give you background information on some prior work done across our state that has allowed the task force to move forward in a more accelerated fashion. And I felt it important for you to be aware of some previous work that's been done leading up to the beginning of our work in December with the Literacy Task Force. Dr. Oxendine had an opportunity to attend our first meeting in December. And so she was able to see some of what I'm going to share with you this morning, and was quick to share with me at the end of the meeting that she felt like her colleagues on the board also needed to be aware of this information. So first, I think it's important for you to be aware that the UNC System Office in 2017 commissioned a report called Leading on Literacy to examine teacher preparation programs within the UNC system. And out of that report came findings around the need to improve teacher preparation, particularly effective reading instruction. So as a result of that, a advisory group was formed on teacher preparation with the 3 charges that you see of developing concrete measurable goals for teacher preparation across the state. In front of you, you see the composition of that preparation advisory group. And I will share with you that Kim Winter was invited to join our literacy task force so that we could have K-12 as well as EPP representation on our literacy task force and bridge the good work that was done by the Education Preparation Advisory Group. Their charge was to develop concrete measurable goals and to prioritize strategies to accelerate improvement in teacher preparation, and also to define the oversight and dissemination roles for the advisory group and the system office. On the next page, you can see the strategies that they focused on. There were 4 key strategies around recruitment and retention, about high quality preparation experiences, authentic P12 partnerships with our pre-K-12 school districts across the state, and obviously graduating highly effective educators. On the next 2 slides, you will see metrics that were recommended by the advisory group to measure progress in each of the 4 primary strategy areas. I won't go over those at this time, but just an awareness and something for you to review later, because one of the first tasks of your literacy task force was to respond to these recommendations and fold those in that we wanted to advance to the state board for consideration. So I felt it important for you to see where we started and that we had a strong platform in terms of some recommendations to review from the EPP task force. Out of that advisory group, a early learning and literacy impact coalition was formed, and you can see the 5 university-based education or prep programs that included both public and private, that came together in a community of practice to be more narrow in their focus, to be looking at evidence-based reading practices and how that should be folded into teacher preparation and recommendations they might make. And so the charge of that community of practice was to look at the evidence-based practice and identify and make a plan to implement changes to the teaching of reading in our education prep programs, and to share recommendations with the UNC system and across the state. On the following pages, you will see the actual priorities and recommendations. And I think this is in particular what Dr. Oxendine was wanting the State Board of Education to be aware of, because many of these recommendations were directed specifically at the State Board of Education. The overarching recommendation, of course, was to set clear expectations around early childhood and elementary preparation programs, so that there would be deep understanding of the principles and practices related to the science of early reading. And then on the next slides, I'll go over quickly specific recommendations made to the State Board of Education. Some of that work has already started in a previous agenda item where your team at the Department of Public Instruction has led a very collaborative process to think about a definition of high quality reading instruction, which our literacy task force did have an opportunity to provide feedback to the team on 2 different occasions. So a common expectations for preparation and literacy in the science of reading. 2, that they would have established common outcomes and what that might look like in terms of an observation instrument and an assessment of a candidate's knowledge and understanding of the principles of the learning science. Recommendation 3, to require all programs to engage candidates in intentionally sequenced clinical experiences that would start in a candidate's first year in the program and not be left until the final year of their student teaching experience. And then the final recommendation around opportunities and incentives for teacher educations, and that would include both the clinical faculty, mentors, and teachers in pre-K-12, in terms of the importance of making sure our pre-K-12 educators, particularly pre-K-3, are well steeped in the science of reading and using curriculum resources that are supported by that evidence-based approach. So these were the 4 recommendations coming out of that community of practice. In addition, there were 2 supporting recommendations. One specifically recommending that the General Assembly provide funds for the Department of Public Instruction to continue to support the previous 4 recommendations. And then a second supporting recommendation to both the Department of Public Instruction and the General Assembly to identify and distribute funds to support the network of programs and their P12 partners. And again, under each of these recommendations are bullets which give specific evidence of what would be included in that recommendation. And certainly you can expect your literacy task force to come back with potentially additional specifics, but certainly a response to each one of these recommendations. I think this allows you to see the huge progress that has been made, particularly by our education prep programs across the state, both public and private. So we'll now turn to the literacy task force work, and you had an opportunity to hear from Dr. Oxendine about our purpose. So I'll quickly move to the next slide to just remind you of the composition of our task force and the representation that we have from the different entities that you see represented on this screen. I have been extraordinarily energized by the commitment level of our task force, and I'm excited about what we will be able to advance to you in just a few weeks. On the next slide, it just gives a little more specifics in terms of the membership on our committee. And now I want to take just a few minutes to give you a sense of our progress to date. We've had 3 task force meetings, and in addition have identified 3 subcommittees to address the specifics of your charge to us around professional development and learning, instructional materials and resources, and pre-service preparation and licensure. In terms of our preliminary considerations, these are certainly not framed as recommendations, to be very clear. Professional development and learning is looking at, of course, best practice as it relates to an evidence-based approach, looking at funding sources for the high quality PD that will be needed for our teachers already in the field that have not received sufficient training in an evidence-based approach to teaching students to read, thinking about the PD capacity at the state, what that model might look like at the state level, and then again, what it might look like in each district, and also thinking about how teachers will demonstrate mastery as it relates to this professional development. And could there be options for demonstration of that mastery? In terms of the curriculum and instruction resources, really looking to think about a process for material selection and vetting, certainly thinking about the need potentially to have what I would call guardrails that certainly do not get into the business of recommending specific materials, but certainly giving districts guidance on what they should be looking for as they review. And also thinking about making sure that there is access to teacher training on these materials, and thinking about the role of the state, the role of the region, as well as the role of the district. And thinking also about the potential need for a rubric or a tool for implementation of literacy instruction. And then the final group that has focused on pre-service preparation and licensure obviously will build off the good work of the advisory group for educator preparation programs commissioned by the university system. And so there are substantive recommendations that have already come forward from that group, as well as our community of practice on early literacy and reading. But some of the areas that you can expect us to be addressing, of course, will be the use of the science of teaching, the training that will be necessary for EPP faculty, as well as pre-K-12 teachers, thoughtful consideration to the development of pathways and credentialing with possible incentives, particularly for reading specialist certification, as well as a master's in reading, and also the need to think about principal preparation as well as district curriculum and instruction team preparation and professional development that will be needed to both bring folks up to speed as well as an ongoing effort to continue to deepen knowledge of our principals and our district leadership around early reading instruction. I believe I've made it within my 10 minutes. I want to just, before I open it up for your questions, just make sure board members are well that you have two treasurers on your Department of Public Instruction team, and Deanna Townsend Smith and Danielle Allen. Their support of this literacy task work has been extraordinary. I have the opportunity to work with many states across this nation. And I just have to say what a privilege it has been to work directly with Deanna and most recently with Danielle. Their support and helping us move this forward and navigate all the protocols we need to be aware of has been extraordinary. And I think it's important for the board to know that. And look forward to your questions, and more specifically, look forward to the opportunity for our recommendations to come before you in a more formal manner in the coming weeks.
Thank you ever so much, Dr. Clark. And I think I will say that on behalf of my 12 colleagues, we agree. Dr. Townsend Smith has taken me to new heights in the world of technology. I tell my students at Pembroke now I'm a genius. So it's amazing what Deanna does for us, and I'm happy to hear. And I'm not the least bit surprised that she is just as supportive in supporting your role and the work of the task force. And with that said, I will open up. If any board member has a question that you would like to ask Dr. Clark, feel free to indicate that to Deanna. I see no questions or comments. Dr. Clark, I am so happy to hear on several occasions during your spots during your presentation, you mentioned the science of reading. That is so important, and it's getting, I sense that it's becoming embedded in discussions among teachers and administrators and college professors and other stakeholders who have an interest in improving the reading achievement of our students in K-3 and actually in K-12. So that's a good sound. I think it's going to guide our definition. It's going to frame our definition of high quality reading instruction, and will take us to new heights. I would also say that I know that the world of virtual meetings is going to change probably the way you plan to approach the completion of your work going forward. We, several months ago, we had talked about the possibility of a final report coming to us about at this time, but I don't see that happening. And I will just, look to your leadership and as well as Dr. Hill and members of the task force to let us know how you how you plan to proceed to bring this to conclusion.
Certainly. We did have a meeting scheduled this Monday that we did need to postpone. As you can imagine, some of the folks involved on our task force are some of the key leaders implementing teaching and learning across our state, as well as our deans of colleges of ed and faculty trying to think through credentialing our future teachers. So they asked if we could have a few additional weeks, and we're going to be doing some committee work virtually prior to our next scheduled meeting. But certainly we'll, through Ms. Townsend Smith, keep you updated on our timeline, but wanted to make sure the board knew that we're making good progress in building on the good work of many educators in our state.
Thank you very much. We look forward to hearing more. Very good. So we will go on to the next item under ES&P, and this is a discussion item. No, actually, I'm sorry. I stand to be corrected. It's an action item. This item was brought to us last month by Dr. Seiberg. It is around the EPP dashboard, which is found and discussed and presented in House Bill 107. Dr. Seiberg gave a very thorough presentation, walked us through the dashboard, how it looks, how it functions, the advantages of having this dashboard, not just for the State Board of Education, but for the General Assembly, for our EPPs and other interested stakeholders who have an interest in learning and becoming educated about the various data that are generated by our EPPs through the various reports that they are required to submit to the State Board of Education and also to the General Assembly. Since our meeting last month, a few minor things were done to enhance the dashboard. Dr. Seiberg tells me that the feedback from Pepsi, the feedback from the EPP deans have been nothing but positive feedback, and any concerns that have come forward, the department certainly has taken the time to address those concerns. So this report is ready to be presented to the General Assembly. As you may recall, we were given, the department was given an extension to April 15th to have this report ready to go. And I received a text message about 2 hours ago from Andrew, Dr. Seiberg, who says that it is, the dashboard is in good shape. All necessary parts of it that need to be in place are in place. So Chairman Davis, I am going to, this is going to be presented for our vote today. Do I have any questions from members, from my colleagues? With no questions, then we will move to the next item on the agenda. And this is a discussion item, ESMP2, Career and Technical Education, CTE licensure policies, and updates to licensure policies and the procedures manual. And this pertains to teacher education. I think it's, yes, it is under CTED 004. And this particular policy covers restricted licenses, adding CTE areas to the current license, and CET support services. This is a very detailed item coming before the board. It is, as I said just a minute ago, as you can see, it's a discussion item. I'm going to just briefly summarize what the kind of the impact of this, of these revisions. If you will follow along with me in the summary, in section 2.05, this will allow ILTs to complete requirements under existing state board policies. In section 206, we have a revision that is going to improve the recruitment and retention efforts that are required in Perkins 5. Also within that section, we have adding a new option in lieu of coursework in the area of CTE. I think that will entail a 2-year curriculum that teachers can enroll in training institutes and go through a 2-year curriculum. And that curriculum covers, I think it covers through 2021. So that is what is in section 206. If you look in section 2.1 to 2.8, this pertains to improving the this particular revision pertains to improving the consistency in course offerings for all CTE areas, consistency to the point of 18 hours of coursework, with the exception of, I think, in agricultural education, we have a 21-hour requirement. We also have, as part of the revisions, two new areas of licensure. the CTE local course teacher and the career development coordinator. In section 4, we have a revision pertaining to support services, and those revisions impact the CTE director. Changes, when I say impact, I'm talking about licensure revisions pertaining to the CTE director position, career development coordinator, the curriculum instruction manager, and within that area, you have some detail about how that is going to allow school administrators to also serve in the capacity or seek licensure to serve in the capacity of an instructional coach in the area of the curriculum instruction component. And then also section 4.0 pertains to the special populations coordinator. We have other updates or other revisions really have to do with general formatting and clarity of language in the procedures manual. And I believe I have quickly given you a synopsis of those revisions. I would ask if Miss Lee O'Neill is available in the audience, if she would like to elaborate or explain or further clarify any of the information that's part of this item, feel free to do so. Miss O'Neill.
Good morning, everybody. Dr. Oxendine, you did a fabulous job. I'm happy to answer anyone's questions. And I think I also provided a PowerPoint with voiceover that takes about 10 minutes that goes into a little more detail on each item.
Okay, very good. Thank you for doing that. And compliments to you, Miss O'Neill. This is major work. It's important work. Anything that pertains to improving, revising, and thus improving the opportunities to expand licensure and to expand opportunities for educators to move into new areas. This is important work, and I commend you for the dedication that you've given to this particular item and all the work behind it.
Well, thank you so much.
Board members, do you have any questions about any item under ES&P agenda? If not, Chair Davis, did someone have a question?
I was saying I didn't. This is Dr. Townsend Smith. I didn't see any questions.
Thank you, Deanna. And Chair Davis, that does conclude my report for this month.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. I'll now turn to Mr. Keenan, Chair of the Healthy Responsible Students Committee. Mr. Keenan.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chair. Myself, along with Alan Duncan, we are co-chair on the HRS committee. Today we have two items for action. The first one we have, Mr. Chair, is HRS 1. We deal with the middle school athletic manual update. And I think Dr. Ellen Essett will take us through that at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. And good morning, Chairman Davis, Superintendent Johnson, members of the board. You have before you a proposed change to the middle school athletic manual. You also have changes that involve some editorial changes, but this is the primary issue that I bring before you. It's proposed to change that practice for fall sports begin no earlier than 10 days prior to the school beginning of this first day of school. This has previously been 6 school days. The rationale for asking to make this change is an opportunity for students to become better physically conditioned and that player safety is taken into consideration. Additionally, students must practice 8 days before their first scrimmage, and this gives a little bit more time again for student safety. And then finally, some of our districts, particularly in the far west, travel all their teams together for fall sports. And this gives them just a little more flexibility with scheduling events. This required change, people don't have to go to 10 days beforehand. They could still do it 6, but it gives them that flexibility if they would like. And that's the only change we have at this time, and I'll entertain any questions.
Any questions? If not, thank you, Dr. Essig.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we'd like to go ahead and proceed to HRS 2, the consolidated data report. As you know, last board meeting with a lot of discussion about the report, and I think with revisions been added, and I think we have Dr. Emery or Dr. Ellaby is that presenters at this time.
This is Dr. Emery. We appreciate the good input and the work that's been done here. I would just recommend your support of this. And if there are questions, we will do everything we can to try to answer them for you.
Questions, anyone? James Ford, Mr. Ford has a question.
Appreciate that, Chairman. I appreciate that, Mr. Keenan. So one is I just want to appreciate everybody on your team, Dr. Emery, for making these revisions to this report. I think that this is exponentially better than the first draft that was submitted. I have two questions, and I'm going to try to ask them at the same time to try to minimize any confusion. One is what I noticed, and I'm glad for, is that, and I appreciate you allowing me to give some input, is going through the UB offenses, the unacceptable behavior offenses, and creating subcategories, and you all have included that in one of the charts showing the specific behaviors that the different demographic groups have been suspended for. I was wondering if we could include a table, maybe in the appendix, and if it's there, I apologize if I missed it, that shows what constitutes each of those behaviors. So for instance, obviously defined behaviors is one of those categories that jumps out. And I know that you all ended up creating, about 6 or 7 different categories or behavior codes that fall into that: defined behavior, disorderly conduct, disrespect of staff, disruptive behavior, inappropriate language, insubordination, and I think in addition to that, aggressive behavior. Is there a way, question one, for us to include a table so that the person reading the report is clear on what constitutes each of those different subcategories? And then the second question I have is with regard to each of the demographic groups. I know that there was some discussion in addition to the rates that have been included, rates of suspension. One of the things I really wanted to see specifically, and requested pretty recently, was to get the percentages. So that is to say, for each demographic group, the raw numbers of those suspended for each behavior or offense divided by the size of the population, so that we can get an idea of proportion. It doesn't strike me that the reader, especially those who are on guard against disproportionality, gets a very clear picture of the proportion of each subgroup that might be suspended. And I know we talked about including both percentages and the rates. And so was there a specific reason why that wasn't included in this version or this draft? So those are my two questions.
Mr. Ford, Bev, again, I think what I'm hearing you request is just a table that creates a vocabulary with definition of the breakout there, which I think should be easily done, and we could add to this. I'm going to defer to perhaps Deanna Townsend Smith, because you all have had some conversation around your second question that unfortunately I was not involved in due to other things going on, and maybe she can enlighten us.
Mr. Ford and Dr. Emery, I will need to work with staff behind the scenes and ask those direct questions. And as soon as I have that, I will report that back out to the group.
Thanks, Deanna. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I think it's a really good question, and I just can't answer it.
No, sure. You've been pretty busy. So I can appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. Emery. Thank you, Dr. Townsend Smith. And Mr. Chair, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Anyone else with questions?
This is Alan Duncan. Can you hear me?
Yes, Alan. Good morning.
Very good. I just wanted to, knowing how incredibly hard the staff's been working in light of events since our last meeting, But I wanted to thank staff for how attentive they've been to following up on the issues that were raised. I don't know where they found the hours, but I'm very appreciative, and I think the report has really benefited from the hard work that's gone into it in hours that must have been not during a 9-to-5 schedule, to say the least. So thank you very much. I do think we all should say that in this instance and many instances to be grateful.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan, for those comments, and I concur 1,000% as the rest of the board. If no other question, Mr. Chair, that concludes our presentation as the SRS committee.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan, and I echo your comments and Vice Chair Duncan's, and thanking our staff for their attention to making this report more complete. I now turn to Vice Chair Duncan for the Business Operations Committee. Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Davis. We have 7 items, all for action. The last being a consent item. The first one is approval of contracts over $500,000, and we have one this month, and this is the renewal of the Sandy Hook Promise contract. We, I think, are fairly familiar with this contract, and it's been out now for your review. Are there any questions or comments on this contract or this proposed renewal of this contract? Not hearing any. Deanna, do you have any?
I have no questions, Vice Chair Duncan.
All right. Well, this matter will be on for action on first reading. And we had asked for, and I'm sure we'll receive at some point in the future, a report on how that process is working and perhaps what effect, if any, we're seeing in light of the disruption in our school year. That does not mean necessarily that there's still not calls coming in. I think we'd all be interested to know as we worry about the social and emotional welfare of our children and our employees. So we might look, I think we look forward to getting some brief report in terms of where things are with the work that's being done on this project, and give thanks for those doing it. Our next 5 items are reports that were, we got a waiver until April 15th to provide. BizOp 2 is a report on Advanced Placement International Baccalaureate Cambridge International Teacher Bonuses. You will recall that Ms. Neha Shah Coltrane gave a pretty thorough report on this one at our last meeting. It has not changed significantly. If there are any questions on it, then I know she is on the line to help respond to those as we finalize this report, but I don't know that we need to do a representation since we had a very fine presentation in the first place. Any questions or comments? Dr. Townsend Smith, am I clear to go?
Yes, sir, you're clear to go. No questions right now.
Thank you very much. I'm going to put BizOp items 3 and 4 together because they're both Dr. Tomberlin's items, and we did not have as much data to provide a report, and so I do want Dr. Tomberlin to do a very brief summary on both these 2 reports. A lot of very good work has been done since we last met, and Dr. Tomberlin, I think, can summarize it in a concise fashion for us and certainly be ready to respond to any questions or comments that we have. So, Dr. Tomberlin, if you don't mind addressing BizOp 3 and BizOp 4, the reports on 4th and 5th grade reading teacher bonuses, and then the report on 4th through 8th grade math teacher bonuses.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So these reports follow the requirements listed in the legislation for reporting out on the impact of the bonus on teacher retention and effectiveness. I would like to make a general statement about these findings that in no way should this be interpreted as a causal relationship between the bonus and any of the relationships that we put forward here. We cannot causally attribute any of this to the bonus. However, there are some interesting things that do come out of this report. one of the chief ones I would direct the members of the board to look at the distribution of the statewide reading bonuses. That is table 1, and you can look at either the math or the reading. And this is where we highlight districts that captured a disproportionate share of the statewide bonuses. So on average, we would expect every district to garner 25% of those bonuses. But we've highlighted those LEAs that captured excessive, bonuses in excess of that expectation of 25%. I think this is particularly important of all the information in this report for the board to be aware of, that there seems to be some real pockets of brilliance out in the across the state, that while we can use data to identify them, we don't have the capacity to understand what kind of programmatic or curricular interventions are going on in those districts that would yield such high percentages. And that seems to be worthy of investigation as you use this report to help identify where children are growing beyond what we would expect in the course of a year. And can that be attributable to programmatic endeavors in the field? We do look at the retention, and in general, teachers who earn the bonus have much lower attrition rates than those who did not earn the bonus. That again, we can't say that that's directly attributable to the bonus system, but it makes sense that that employees that are demonstrating success as defined by academic growth with their students are more likely to remain engaged in the profession than those who are experiencing difficulty in achieving that growth. And that really, unless there are specific questions from the board, I think those are the two big things that the board should take away from this report. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Tomlin. And one highlight, I think, if we look at the table 1 of the reports, is where the information about where districts may have been doing a particularly effective job worthy of further study to see if there's programmatic innovations that we can all benefit from. If you look at the 4th and 5th grade reading report, Cabarrus County Schools, which has a large sample size, is in the top 5 in both 4th grade reading and 5th grade reading. So that's just an example or illustration. And if you look at the table 1 again in the math, 4th through 8th grade, the Mooresville Graded School District is in the 4th grade and the 6th grade top 5, and Union County schools are in the top 5 in 6th and 7th grade math. So it appears that those programs are doing extremely well, and there may be some things to learn from those, as Dr. Tomberlin has suggested, as we move forward. Are there questions and comments about this report as we have it ready to go to the legislature? Or these two reports, I should say.
I don't see any questions right now, Mr. Duncan.
All right, thank you. Dr. Tomlin, thank you. These reports are very interesting and informative, so thank you for the work on these, and you and your staff. Our next report, Biz Up 5, we did have a pretty full presentation at our last meeting on discussion for the Career and Technical Education Bonus Report. Ms. Kimberly McDonald helped us with that report, and she is available now if there are any questions or comments that anyone has as you've had time to reflect on the information that we received. Dr.
No
Townsend
questions,
Smith, I'll wait for you.
No
Okay,
questions,
thank you.
sir.
Thank you. Biz Op 6 is a report to the North Carolina General Assembly on 3rd grade reading bonuses, and there has been information further added to this report or developed in this report. And I know Dr. Tomlin helped provide the information, but Dr. Galloway is the one who has assembled, and her staff, and have worked through the report. And so I believe that Dr. Galloway will be on the line to give us again a brief synopsis of what we have here from this report.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, and thank you.
Absolutely. So this report is of the third grade Read to Achieve teacher bonus program for this year, and a huge thanks to Tom's office and Alexa's office for providing all of the support necessary to pull all of these numbers together, and their team's hard work for doing that. So huge thanks and kudos to a lot of people who went into doing this. This report does share some interesting information that I highlighted on the slides. So I wanted to go through a little bit of the information and then take questions at the end if you have further questions. The distribution of qualifying teachers, I pulled that out of the report and put it on a slide for you to be able to see a little more clearly. This suggests the trends in data that a relationship could provide valuable information to the field about how to support students in reading at grade level by the end of the third grade. And so the statistical significance, we can see that the majority of the teachers who were qualifying for the bonus were between the 25 to 30 year mark, with 38% of the teachers falling into that category. So I pulled out the years of experience with statistical significance deviation from the mean, which is the 25% mark. I pulled those out and highlighted those in the slide for us. But the key takeaway for me was that the more experience that the teachers had, it looked like those teachers qualified more for the bonus. The shifts in the bonus recipients are highlighted on the next slide. And this slide just simply shows the substantial changes in the number of teachers in one LEA from one year to the next year, and how that might be suggestive of changes to the instructional practices that might yield better academic growth for the students, or an LEA that's struggling to retain effective teachers. So the list there is for the LEAs that had qualifying teachers last year versus this year, and the loss or gain and the percentages of those. The following slide shows teacher performance and highlighting the difference in average EVOS index scores, how it does not indicate diminished effectiveness the following year for those who qualified and increased effectiveness for those who did not. So most teachers will demonstrate performance that is consistent with the average. The following slide is about teacher retention. And I received a few questions about that one, so I highlighted some of the answers to the questions on the following slide. Increasing your retention among third grade reading teachers is one goal of the Read to Achieve bonus. And as far as how that table shows, it shows that qualifying for the bonus has resulted in higher percentages of teachers who remained in the LEA and or remained teaching third grade. Having greater years of experience correlated with higher retention rates. And then we can perceive from that sharing knowledge of effective reading instruction could potentially improve reading outcomes and provide stability and persistence in third grade. So I highlighted the main points that I had either received questions about or that I saw as the important things in the report. So if you have further questions, I'll be glad to take those at this time.
Do we have any questions, comments?
This is Olivia.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan, and thank you, Dr. Galloway. I've taken notes frantically in front of me pertaining to the data point that you just shared a minute ago about the relationship between experience, retention, and the bonuses. I certainly didn't get all the nuance, but I do have kind of the big picture. Dr. Galloway, please share that information, and I suspect that you will. Please share that data with the K-3 Literacy Task Force. Okay. And also Dr. Molinek's, her group that's working on the definition along with the 9 area point framework. I mean, there's got to be a way to wed all of this fine information data so that we can come out with something great. Such fascinating work. Great report.
That is a great point. Collaboration is key, and
thank you.
Pulling everything together. You're exactly right.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. Other questions or comments?
Chairman, JB.
Please, Ms. Buxton.
One clarifying question for Dr. Galloway. On the mobility rates and the point that Dr. Oxendine was just talking about, I want to make sure I understand something. When we note teachers who qualified for the bonus resulted in higher percentage of teachers who remained in the LEA and or remained teaching third grade, how would we code someone who taught third grade and then a principal decided to move to second grade? Would they be, how would we treat that person?
Tom, if you're on the line, if you know more about how the data came,
Yes.
how it came in and how you put it into the table. So if you can answer.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Buxton, the LEA / third grade is an either or, not a both and. So in either event, the teacher would be labeled as mobile from third grade reading, even if he or she remained in the same LEA.
Okay. So in the case that a principal said, this teacher was so good teaching reading, I'd like to move her upstream and have her working with kindergarten, first or second grade teachers, we would count that as someone who was not retained under this report.
Not retained as teaching third grade reading. Right. Yes, that is correct.
So I would just want to caveat these then, because I think that's then tough to understand what some of the different dynamics that might be happening.
Absolutely. I don't think that should be interpreted as that this is the teacher's decision. I mean, staffing decisions, all that would play into this. And the corollary to what you're saying is also true. And a less experienced teacher who, with those higher attrition rates, that could be the decision of the LEA to redeploy that employee in a different grade level, which we would pick up as mobility from the third grade reading.
Appreciate it, Dr. Tomlin. Mr. Chairman, just a quick comment when you finish the third grade on the bonus programs in general.
Well, unless there's other questions and we may be able to add that caveat to the report that you just suggested. Dr. Galloway, is that something you believe you could footnote in at least, so that helps clarify that data?
Absolutely could.
Very good. Unless there's other questions or comments, I will come right back to you. Are there other questions and comments on the third grade reading bonuses? All right, well, not hearing of any, Mr. Buxton, I'll come back to you for your further comment.
Just a thought for my colleagues that given that it looks like across all these bonus programs, I think including AP and IB, we're spending about $35 million in teacher bonuses. And given that these reports are not intended to be deep research studies, as Dr. Tomlin mentioned, but the best we can do looking at the data, and given that we're probably not going to be giving these out this year due to the lack of assessment data, it seems like a natural time for us to work with the General Assembly to look at this strategy for improving reading achievement. And while I don't want to advocate that we don't want to pay teachers more doing an exceptional job, I think that's a great goal. I do want to make sure that at $35 million, we feel like that's the best investment of that money. And as we pause this year, it may be a good time to open up that conversation or engage a research partner on what we can really know. Because we've got a number of things we've put together in our legislative request around reading coaching, professional development, and this feels like a natural time to be asking those questions.
It's a good comment. And another thing that the table, for us to think about, is the table that Dr. Galloway referred to, table 1 again. In this instance, there's a lot of research out there that suggests for many educators, some of their best years or most productive years are somewhere between 8 and 15 to 18, somewhere in the middle parts of their careers. Interestingly, for reading for third grade students, this chart would tend to indicate it's once you hit 15 years that you hit your highest productivity in terms of being able to achieve success in teaching reading to third graders at an even higher level than teachers who are with less than 15 years of experience, which is an interesting finding and one worth reflection upon as we make these other reflections you suggest. So, all right, with that then, let's go on to BizOp 7, which is one of our routine items, the certification of finance officers, of which we have a couple this month. On executed contracts report, I have not received any questions on the executed contracts. I have received a couple of questions with respect to the planned contracts, and so I want to reflect those questions that have been received. One of them is about the contract for the headsets, and the question that was made was, are these compliant with the devices that the state has been buying for districts, and that's been iPad and Chromebook, as you'll recall? And the answer to that question is yes, they are compliant with those particular devices. There are some devices that a district may have bought on their own that they may not be compliant with, but certainly the items that the state has been purchasing on behalf of districts in the area of iPad devices or Chromebook devices, and in many cases districts who have been buying such devices, the headphones are to be compliant with those. And they're also believed to be a very helpful classroom addition in the sense that some of the work that's done by students has a noise component, and this allows the students to do the work without it distracting other students. A second question that got asked is on the contract for accountability services, and this is the contract that runs between $8.5 million and $8.8 million or so a year between July 1, 2020 and June 30th, 2021. And this is for the work done to develop and deliver the statewide testing program. And the question was asked is, before we enter into a contract, do we need to do anything to study or review how that program may be altered, possibly, or not, depending upon how we go with the disruption that we're presently dealing with school issues? And so the request was made to ask staff to come back and provide information about the status of that issue. That is, would there in some form, if there's waivers, would there in some form be less to do under these contracts and therefore a modification appropriate or not? So, and I don't have answers to that question, and I know staff will have answers if, so I'll just throw that question out there, not really necessarily trying to put anybody on the spot to answer it right now, but ask if staff can look at that issue and provide additional information that it would be helpful. Got a question about the contract that's with DIT for connectivity, which is a $22 million contract for internet access, content filtering, and firewall service. And the question was really more along the line is this contract going to help us increase our interconnectivity based on the times we find ourselves in? And the information I get is it will help. It's certainly not going to hurt. We need all the help that we can get in that area, but this is part of the services that we need to receive in order to establish as best we can our internet access, firewall, and content filtering services, all of which are important to serve our students. But this will not answer the interconnectivity issues or all the ones that we face as a state, as we're dealing with those right now. Certainly aids, but does not answer. And the last question that I got had to do with the contracts for Governor's School. We have our two great partners for Governor's School, the West Campus at High Point University and the East Campus at Meredith, and we have proposed contracts to be signed in here. And the questions raised have been to the effect of, do we know for a certainty that those campuses will even be open this summer based on their own situations and trying to deal how they're dealing with the crisis, as well as what our situation may be in terms of whether or not we're, as a state, ready for that type of gathering of students in a location, in this case a residential location, or will we be ready for it by the time Governor's School would would generally start. And so the question was raised, can we get additional information about will the contracts take that into effect, number one, and number two, have we, where is our level of consultation or confidence? Nobody can have confidence one way or the other right now. I don't think the questioner expected that. But how we might best deal with this, given some of the uncertainties we're dealing with on that contract, and how we certainly would not want Governor School to not go forward if it's at all possible. But on the other hand, I think we all have to acknowledge there's a little bit of uncertainty about where we are on that, and that may also include uncertainty by the institutions involved at some point as it develops. So that was the other question I got. So I've thrown out all of those that are things we may well need additional information on, and glad for any further comment anyone wants to make, or otherwise, unless somebody has a question on our agency vacancy report, that would conclude the BizOp committee report on behalf of Todd Chastain, our vice chair, and myself.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Thomas is on the line, and she would just like to make a general comment about the Governor School component.
Please.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, that would, yeah, no, we, not only not mine, we would be very glad to hear it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Thomas?
Good morning, everyone. We have been struggling and wrestling and discussing with the decisions around Governor School as well. And I believe we will have a decision to bring forth to leadership by the end of next week regarding Governor School for 2020.
Thank you. That's very helpful, and appreciate the, I'm sure, difficult work that's going into gathering all the facts to try to make the best decision we can. Thank you for that.
Absolutely, we're doing our best. It's a tough time for everybody.
It truly is. And some of these contracts illustrate some of the issues we have to struggle with in a number of different areas. So thank you for being a guiding point to help us through that one. Other comments or questions?
I see no further comments or questions right now, Mr. Duncan.
That concludes our committee's report. Thank you very much for your patience, Chairman Davis.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan. And this concludes our committee work. We do have one item of new business concerning the state of emergency leave policy, and I'll call on our General Counsel, Mr. Schneider, for this item.
Sick leave. Good morning, board members. Deanna, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. In our haste to finalize this important leave policy last week, this policy that echoes the state emergency leave, we inadvertently included a reference to paid parental leave, which is a state OSHR concept. It's not one that appears in our state benefits, in the benefits manual approved by the state board. This was an issue flagged by locals this week, and as a clarification, we would like to remove that inadvertently included phrase. But that's the only update with respect to the emergency sick leave policy at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Schneider on that item? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Schneider. Colleagues will now vote on any item requiring action from your committee reports. A thorough discussion and report was provided on each item, including any respective consent items. I note for the record that Mr. Ford is recused from EICS 10. As a reminder, any item on the consent agenda is primarily not complex and may have come to the board for discussion in a prior month. And I note also that board members have seen these consent agenda items for about a week. At this time, is there a request to remove any item from the consent action or action on first reading agendas? Hearing none, I request a motion to approve the following. State Board meeting minutes from March 4 through 5, March 14, March 18, March 23rd, and March 27th, 2020 board meetings. and ESNP 1, EICS 7 through 10, SLA 1 and 2, the SLA item on delay of K-12 computer science standard course of study development, BizOp 1 through 7 with the addition of the item on BizOp 6 requested by Mr. Buxton, HRS 1 and 2 with the addition of the items requested by Mr. Ford on HRS 2, and the correction to the state of emergency sick leave policy presented by Mr. Schneider. Is there a motion?
So moved. Ms. Kamnitz.
Motion by Ms. Kamnitz. Is there a second?
I second Olivia Oxendine.
Second by Dr. Oxendine. Any question or discussion on this motion?
Mr. Chair, it's Mr. Ford. This is a point of clarification. So EICS 10 will be taken out as a separate matter in our vote, or will all be voted on collectively?
I think we can vote collectively, having noted that your vote recuses yourself from EICS 10.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yes, sir. Any other questions? Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll to capture the vote?
Yes, sir. Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Ms. Kamnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Hall? Mr. Hall? Mr. Hall, I see you. Can you hear me? I'll come back. Dr. Tipton Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Mr. Chastain?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor?
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Chair Davis?
Yes.
It's approved.
Thank you, Dr. Townsend Smith. And thanks to my colleagues and DPI staff and other contributors that participated in today's meetings. I want each of you to stay safe during this time and take care of yourselves and your families and neighbors. We will survive this health crisis, and we will maintain the promise of a sound basic education for all North Carolina students through your continued tireless contributions. Next month, we were to have our planning and work session, and at this time, we'll maintain the dates on our calendars in case we need to meet to handle any board business or structure our meeting differently, given the multiple items that will need to come before the board for consideration. Our planning and work session will be rescheduled to another time. I now ask for a motion to go into closed session, and note for the audience and online listeners that following closed session, the April 2nd, 2020 meeting will adjourn immediately. Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I move that the State Board of Education go into closed session to consult with our attorneys to discuss Hoke County versus State of North Carolina and North Carolina State Board of Education, Kinetic Minds Inspire, LLC, and Escabana Henderson versus North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, Kinetic Minds, LLC, and Denise Henderson versus North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, MR versus North Carolina State Board of Education et al. Discuss personnel matters, discuss other attorney-client privilege matters, and discuss information that is privileged and confidential pursuant to 09 NCAC 06B.0103, confidentiality of solicitation documents, and 09 NCAC 06B.0309, evaluation.
Motion by Mr. Duncan. Is there a second?
Second by Mrs. White.
Second by Ms. White. Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll to capture the vote?
Yes, sir. Mr. Buxton,
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine,
Yes.
Ms. Chemnitz,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers,
Yes.
Ms. White,
Yes.
Mr. Chastain,
Yes.
Mr. Ford,
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan,
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Very good. We will now move to closed session. Colleagues, let's take a 10-minute break and be in closed session at 11:55. And a note to all listening that at the conclusion of closed session, this meeting will be adjourned. 11:55.